Twinkling lights adorned the palm trees lining Ocean Boulevard in Palm Harbor, Florida. The small coastal town buzzed with last-minute Christmas Eve shoppers, their arms laden with brightly wrapped packages. Festive music drifted from storefronts, mingling with the salty sea breeze. In a modest bungalow just off the main drag, Fred, a retired police German shepherd, paced restlessly. His graying muzzle and slightly stiff gait betrayed his age, but his eyes remained sharp and alert. The old dog's ears perked up at the sound of off-key caroling from the street, a stark contrast to the quiet of the house. Dave, Fred's owner and former police partner, had dozed off in his recliner, the TV remote still clutched in his hand. The retired officer's cane leaned against the arm of the chair, a constant reminder of the injury that had ended both their careers. Fred padded over, gently nudging Dave's hand with his nose. No response. The dog's gaze drifted to the back door, left slightly ajar as usual. The warm night air carried a mix of scents: pine from the neighbor's Christmas tree, roasting turkey from down the street, and something else. Something unusual. Fred's nostrils flared. Years of training kicked in, overriding the aches in his joints. He slipped out the door, his paws silent on the dewy grass. The streets of Palm Harbor were alive with holiday cheer. Families strolled along the sidewalks, admiring elaborate light displays. Couples walked hand in hand, stealing kisses under mistletoe hung from shop awnings. But Fred paid no attention to the festivities. His nose led him purposefully down side streets and through alleyways. The scent grew stronger as he approached Joe's Diner, a local institution known for its pies and all-day breakfast. The diner's neon "Open" sign cast a red glow in the alley behind it, illuminating overflowing dumpsters and stacks of empty produce crates. Fred's ears twitched at the clatter of dishes from inside the diner. But that wasn't what had drawn him here. He moved deeper into the alley, weaving between discarded Christmas decorations. A broken plastic Santa, tangled strands of lights, a lopsided wreath. And then he saw it. A cardboard box, barely visible behind a stack of crates. To anyone else it might have looked like more holiday trash, but Fred knew better. The scent emanating from that box was unmistakable, human, but faint. Too faint. With careful steps, Fred approached the box. Using his muzzle, he nudged aside a piece of tattered tinsel draped across the top. What he saw inside made his heart race. A tiny baby lay motionless, wrapped in a thin blanket. The infant's skin had a bluish tinge, barely visible in the dim light. No cries, no movement. To human eyes, it might have appeared too late. But Fred's keen senses detected the faintest trace of life, a nearly imperceptible rise and fall of the tiny chest. There wasn't a moment to lose. With the gentleness of a mother cat carrying a kitten, Fred took the edge of the blanket between his teeth. He lifted the box, surprised by how light it was. The baby inside didn't stir. Fred's mind raced. The police station? No. Too far. The fire department? Closed for renovations. There was only one option: the small community hospital on the other side of town. He set off at a trot, the precious cargo secure in his jaws. The main streets were clogged with cars and pedestrians, forcing Fred to weave through back alleys and side streets. Each step jostled the box, but the baby remained eerily still and silent. As he crossed Ocean Boulevard, a group of teenagers nearly knocked the box from his grasp. "Hey, look at that dog, what's he got?" one called out. But Fred pressed on, ignoring their curious stares. The journey that would have once been effortless now taxed Fred's aging body. His legs began to tremble with exertion, and his breathing grew labored. But the faint, precious heartbeat from the box drove him forward. Finally, the lights of Palm Harbor Community Hospital came into view. Fred's pace quickened as he entered the parking lot, scanning for a familiar face. And there she was, Kate, the kind-hearted nurse who always had a treat and a pat for him when Dave came in for checkups. Kate was just getting out of her car, adjusting her scrubs and reaching for her bag. Her eyes lit up when she spotted Fred. "Well, hello there, handsome. What brings you here on Christmas Eve?" she called out cheerfully. But as Fred drew closer, Kate's smile faded. Something was wrong. The old dog's eyes were wide with urgency, and he was carrying a box. Fred gently set the box on the ground at Kate's feet. He looked up at her, and let out a soft, mournful whine, a sound she had never heard him make before. It sent a chill down her spine. "Fred, what is it, boy?" Kate knelt down, her hand hesitating over the box. The cardboard was damp from Fred's saliva, and she could see it had been hastily taped shut. With trembling fingers, she pried open one of the flaps. The world seemed to stop spinning as Kate peered inside. Her gasp caught in her throat, coming out as a strangled cry. "Oh my God," she whispered, her medical training kicking in even as her mind reeled. In one fluid motion, Kate scooped up the box and sprinted toward the emergency room entrance. "I need help out here now," she shouted, her voice carrying the unmistakable tone of urgent crisis. The automatic doors hadn't finished sliding open before Kate burst through, the box cradled protectively against her chest. "Hypothermic infant, unresponsive," she called out, her words galvanizing the ER into action. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a comment below and share what you would have done in Kate's place. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartfelt animal stories. Dr. Ramirez, the on-call pediatrician, appeared as if summoned by magic. "What do we have?" he asked, already reaching for the box. "Abandoned newborn, found by a dog," Kate explained breathlessly, carefully transferring the baby onto an exam table. No visible trauma, but severely hypothermic. No response to stimuli. The ER team moved with practiced efficiency. Warm blankets were brought in, an IV was started, and a tiny oxygen mask was placed over the infant's face. Dr. Ramirez called out orders rapid fire, his experienced hands never stopping their assessment. "Core temperature 90 degrees, a nurse announced, her voice tight with concern. "Let's get a warming blanket and start warm saline," Dr. Ramirez responded. "And page NICU, we're going to need them." As the medical drama unfolded inside, Fred sat just outside the ER doors. His tail thumped weakly against the ground, brown eyes fixed on the entrance. A security guard approached, ready to shoo away the dog, but something in Fred's demeanor made him pause. "You brought that baby in, didn't you, boy?" the guard said softly, crouching down to Fred's level. "You're a real hero, you know that." Fred's ears perked up at the word hero, a term he hadn't heard in years, but his focus remained on those doors, waiting for news. Inside, the fight for the baby's life continued. "Come on, little one," Dr. Ramirez murmured, his stethoscope pressed to the tiny chest. "That's it, keep fighting." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, color began to return to the infant's cheeks. The monitors showed a strengthening heartbeat, each blip on the screen a small victory. Kate, assisting with the resuscitation efforts, found her eyes welling with tears. "It's a Christmas miracle," she whispered, gently stroking the baby's arm. As dawn broke over Palm Harbor, casting a warm glow through the hospital windows, Fred remained at his post. His keen ears picked up the sound of approaching footsteps, and he raised his head expectantly. Kate emerged from the ER, her scrubs rumpled and dark circles under her eyes betraying the long night. But there was a smile on her face as she knelt beside Fred. "You did it, boy," she said softly, scratching behind his ears. "That baby's going to make it thanks to you." Fred's tail wagged weakly, his brown eyes meeting Kate's. In that moment a bond formed between them, the nurse and the retired police dog, united by an act of Christmas heroism. But Fred's work wasn't done. With a soft whine, he got to his feet, tugging gently at Kate's scrubs. "What is it?" Kate asked, her brow furrowing. "Do you need to go home?" Fred barked once, then turned and took a few steps toward the parking lot before looking back at Kate. The message was clear. There was somewhere else he needed to be. "Okay, boy," Kate said, her curiosity piqued. "Lead the way." As they set off into the crisp morning air, the first rays of Christmas sun peeking over the horizon, neither Kate nor Fred could have imagined the journey that lay ahead. The story of the abandoned baby and the heroic dog was just beginning, and Palm Harbor would never be the same. As Kate and Fred set off from the hospital, the streets of Palm Harbor were just beginning to stir. Christmas lights twinkled stubbornly against the growing dawn, and the scent of freshly baked cinnamon rolls wafted from Joe's diner. But Fred paid no attention to these festive distractions. His mission was clear. With a determined trot, Fred led Kate through the winding streets. Despite his age, there was a newfound energy in his steps. Kate struggled to keep up, her scrubs rustling as she jogged behind the old dog. "Where are we going, Fred?" Kate called out. But Fred merely glanced back, his eyes conveying an urgency that needed no words. As they rounded the corner onto Maple Street, Fred's pace quickened. He bounded up the steps of a small bungalow, scratching at the door and letting out a series of sharp barks. Inside, Dave stirred from his armchair, the sound of Fred's barking cutting through his groggy state. "Fred," he mumbled, reaching for his cane. The urgency in the dog's voice was unmistakable, even through the door. Dave hobbled to the entrance, his arthritic hands fumbling with the lock. As the door swung open, Fred burst in, circling Dave's legs and whining insistently. "What's gotten into you, old boy?" Dave asked, his voice thick with concern. It was then that he noticed Kate standing on his porch, still in her scrubs, looking both exhausted and exhilarated. "Mr. Taylor?" Kate said, slightly out of breath. "I'm Kate, from the hospital. Your dog, Fred, he's done something incredible." Over the next few minutes, Kate recounted the night's events. Dave's face cycled through a range of emotions: confusion, shock, and finally, immense pride. As the story unfolded, he found himself sinking into his armchair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what his old partner had done. "I always knew you had a few more rescues in you, buddy," Dave said softly, scratching behind Fred's ears. The old dog's tail thumped against the floor, his mission accomplished. But there was no time to bask in the moment. Dave's police instincts, dormant but never forgotten, kicked into high gear. "We need to report this," he said, reaching for his phone. "The baby, someone must be looking for it." With practiced efficiency, Dave dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Captain Rodriguez? It's Dave Taylor." "We've got a situation." As Dave filled in his former colleagues, Kate knelt beside Fred, her hand resting gently on his graying muzzle. "You're quite the Christmas angel, aren't you?" she whispered. Fred's warm brown eyes met hers, filled with a wisdom that seemed to transcend his canine nature. Within minutes, the quiet Christmas morning on Maple Street was shattered by the arrival of police cruisers, their lights flashing silently in deference to the holiday. Officer Ramirez, a young cop Dave had once mentored, was the first to approach. "Quite a story, sir," Ramirez said, notepad in hand. "We'll need you both to come down to the station to give official statements." Dave nodded, reaching for his coat. "Of course. But first we need to get back to the hospital. That baby—" "Say no more," Ramirez replied, understanding in his eyes. "I'll give you a lift myself." The ride to the hospital was tense, the silence broken only by the crackle of the police radio and Fred's occasional whine from the back seat. Dave's gnarled hands gripped his cane, his mind racing with questions about the baby's fate. Inside the hospital was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The ER waiting room, festooned with garlands and twinkling lights, was packed with curious staff and worried family members of other patients. The story of the dog who saved a baby on Christmas Eve had spread like wildfire. Kate, who had arrived ahead of them, met the group at the entrance. Her face was drawn with fatigue, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "The baby's still critical but stable," she reported. "Dr. Ramirez is with him now. It's touch and go." Dave nodded solemnly, his hand resting on Fred's head. The old dog's eyes were fixed on the doors leading to the pediatric unit, as if he could will the baby to health through sheer determination. As they settled into the waiting area, the hours began to blur. Christmas carols played softly from hidden speakers, a surreal backdrop to the drama unfolding. Hospital staff, unable to contain their curiosity, found excuses to pass by, stealing glances at the heroic dog and his human companions. Fred, for his part, remained vigilant. He lay at Dave's feet, his head rising at every sound from the pediatric unit. Occasionally a child would approach, drawn by the presence of a dog in the hospital. Fred would allow a gentle pat, but his focus never wavered from his self-appointed guard duty. As morning gave way to afternoon, Kate emerged from the double doors, her face unreadable. Dave straightened in his chair, his grip on his cane tightening. "There's been a development," Kate began, her voice carefully neutral. "The baby." The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Fred's ears perked up, his eyes locked on Kate's face. "The baby's fever has broken," Kate continued, a smile finally breaking through her professional demeanor. Dr. Ramirez thinks we're past the worst of it. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the waiting room. Dave felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes, and he reached down to ruffle Fred's fur. "You hear that, boy? You did good. Real good." As if on cue, a sound echoed from the pediatric unit, a cry high and clear. It was the most beautiful noise any of them had ever heard. "Is that?" Dave asked, his voice thick with emotion. Kate nodded, her own eyes glistening. "That's our little Christmas miracle. First real cry since he got here. Sounds like he's got quite a set of lungs on him." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Police officers came and went, taking statements and conferring in hushed tones. Hospital administrators huddled with legal teams, discussing the complexities of the situation. Through it all, Fred remained a calm presence, his steady gaze a reminder of the simple act of compassion that had set everything in motion. As evening approached, Dr. Ramirez himself appeared in the waiting room. The lines of fatigue on his face were softened by a smile of genuine joy. "I thought you all might like an update," he began, his voice carrying easily over the hushed conversations. "Our little John Doe is doing remarkably well, all things considered. He's responding to treatment, maintaining his body temperature, and showing good signs of alertness." A ripple of applause went through the room. "Doctor," Ramirez held up a hand, not quite finished. "We're not out of the woods yet," he cautioned, "but I've been a pediatrician for 20 years, and I've never seen a recovery quite like this. It's like..." He paused, searching for the right words. It's like he knew he had something to fight for. At this, all eyes turned to Fred. The old dog, sensing the attention, lifted his head, his tail thumping softly against the linoleum floor. "I understand we have a four-legged hero to thank for this Christmas miracle," Dr. Ramirez continued, crouching down to Fred's level. From his pocket, he produced a small wrapped package. The cafeteria staff put this together when they heard the story. "Merry Christmas, boy." With gentle hands, Dr. Ramirez unwrapped the package, revealing an assortment of gourmet dog treats. Fred's nose twitched with interest, but he looked to Dave for permission before accepting the gift. "Go on, Fred," Dave said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You've earned it." As Fred delicately took a treat, the waiting room erupted in cheers and applause. Hospital staff, patients, and visitors alike crowded around, each wanting to pat the canine hero or shake Dave's hand. In the midst of the impromptu celebration, Kate appeared at Dave's elbow. "Would you like to see him?" she asked softly. "The baby, I mean. Dr. Ramirez says it's okay, just for a moment." Dave nodded, words failing him. With Kate's help, he rose from his chair, leaning heavily on his cane. Fred was instantly at his side, providing silent support as they made their way through the double doors. The pediatric unit was quieter than the waiting room, the sounds muffled and the lights dimmed. Kate led them to a small room where a clear plastic bassinet stood surrounded by monitors and IV stands. And there, nestled among blankets and bathed in the soft glow of Christmas lights strung along the window, lay the tiniest baby Dave had ever seen. "Oh," Dave breathed, his free hand reaching out to touch the bassinet. "He's so small." Kate nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. 4 pounds, 3 ounces. But he's a fighter." Fred stretched up, his paws on the edge of the bassinet, peering in at the life he had saved. The baby stirred, tiny fists waving in the air, and let out a soft coo. For a long moment they stood there in silence, the retired cop, the nurse, the old dog, and the baby who had brought them all together on this most extraordinary of Christmas days. As they turned to leave, allowing the baby the rest he needed, Dave felt a tug on his pant leg. Looking down, he saw Fred gazing up at him, a question in those soulful brown eyes. "Yeah, buddy," Dave said, understanding perfectly. "We'll be back. Someone's got to keep an eye on this little guy, right?" As they made their way back to the waiting room, the sound of Christmas carols drifted through the halls. But mixed with the familiar melodies was a new sound, the clear, strong cry of a baby defying the odds, a reminder of the miracle they had all witnessed. Outside the hospital windows, snow had begun to fall, dusting Palm Harbor with a rare white Christmas. As night settled over the town, The stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if in celebration of the life that had been saved and the bonds that had been forged. In the pediatric unit, a night nurse adjusted the blankets around the sleeping baby, pausing to straighten a small sign that had been placed on the bassinet. It read simply, "Baby Fred," a temporary name for a child whose story was just beginning, thanks to the heroic actions of an old dog with a heart of gold. And in homes across Palm Harbor, as families gathered for Christmas dinner and children played with new toys, the story was already spreading, a tale of hope, of compassion, and of the enduring spirit of the season. It was a reminder to all that sometimes the greatest gifts come in the most unexpected packages, and that heroes can be found in the most unlikely of places. As the hospital settled into the quiet rhythms of night, Fred lay curled at the foot of Dave's chair, his mission complete, but his vigil far from over. In his dreams, perhaps, he ran again as a young dog, strong and swift, always ready to answer the call of duty. But here now, in the waking world, he had found a new purpose. A guardian angel with fur and four paws, a silent sentinel for the smallest and most vulnerable among us. And as the clock struck midnight, marking the end of one extraordinary Christmas and the beginning of a new day full of possibilities, the faint sound of jingle bells could be heard on the winter wind, a gentle reminder that in this season of miracles, anything is possible, especially when guided by the unwavering loyalty of man's best friend,